Welcome to the Truffles Therapy podcast. I'm here with Kilindi Iyi. He is quite a legendary psychonaut and psilocybin expert, and many of you might have heard of him talk about high-dose psilocybin journeys. He's into taking 20, 30, 40 grams of mushrooms, and yeah, he's quite a special character in the psychedelic world, and he really pushes the limits and stands up for minorities and underrepresented people. So thank you very much for being on here, Kilindi.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Anytime I can talk and share with people about the mushrooms.
Beautiful. Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's been on your mind recently? What's been at the forefront? What kind of insights have the mushrooms been showing you over your last couple of journeys?
Well, that we have to push the envelope to move towards the next level of the human, and that's really out of the human into transhumanism on certain levels from an organic perspective, and then into the greater mystery. I've been taking mushrooms for a little while now, and these instances of this theme reoccurring in the last few years has been a focal point of mine. I see mushrooms as the quintessential hallucinogen, psychedelic entheogen on the planet because it has the older informational structure. See, many of the others, pretty much all of the others are earthbound plants, and plants are, even though we'd have to get into that later, the extraterrestrial plants, the sacred grains and things like that were delivered to the earth to be planted for foodstuffs, just like Bitcoin, the algorithms were downloaded to earth for us to have a financial system that is viable in real time, and through that and multidimensionality. The mushroom's older plenum of information comes from that it is a extraterrestrial fungi. Fungi is prevalent through the universe. It doesn't need the same type of structures that plants do to flourish and survive. Mushrooms, the spores are some of the hardest things in the natural environment, and they can very easily traverse between solar systems and planets and things like that in the vacuum of space, which is extremely cold, dry, and that makes it perfect for going from planet to planet, solar system to solar system. If you want to say or deal with panspermia, you could do that also. But that being said, I've done many of the other psychedelics and hallucinogens, and I've found that mushrooms will reproduce any of the other experiences at the proper dose. It'll do LSD, it'll do ayahuasca, it'll do salvia divinorum, it'll do Hawaiian baby rosewood, and all of the plethora of different areas. But it is not a free ride. You have to work with it. You have to develop a sense of how you are going to approach it, and you have to get your sea legs. Many times on Facebook and Instagram and other things, folks say, well, I took the mushrooms one time and it wasn't pleasant. Well, usually in the beginning it's pleasant because they want to draw you in. But this isn't for pleasure and fun, in my opinion, in that high dose. That is part of it. People at raves and different festivals and things like that take it recreationally, and then some folks just take a few grams to go out and party.
I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, I don't, because I want to be in the bed clutching my pillow. But
that's right.
Some people, they have a different sensibility as far as approaching it. So I'm not against that. Everybody's young once, but for those who really have the wherewithal and the understanding of what this really is, what the mushroom really represents to the human consciousness and frame, would understand that it's not something to play with, and it is for serious work. And serious work is done at high dose, pushing the envelope, pushing the pedal to the floor, to be able to explore things that have never been explored, to be able to see things that have never been seen, and to go where no one has gone before, to pull from Star Trek. So mushrooms are really where it's at. It is the journey of the alone into the alone. In other words, the real work is done in darkness and alone. That means no candles, no music and things like that. We've introduced technologies such as the transdimensional crystal that we have, the Yiming Zhu crystal, which is a very special crystal that wasn't even in the gem books and the different literature dealing with gemology until very recent, because they were only held by the emperors and empresses of China, the great Khans of Mongolia. Some African kings had them, but they weren't for regular people. So we've been introducing these things as ways to build a technology to be able to hold on to in the deeper and darker realms, kind of like Thor's hammer in Thor Ragnarok. You have to, when I'm talking, you have to know your modern mythology. When Thor's hammer was destroyed, he was approached by Odin, and he says, "I don't have my hammer, I don't have my hammer, I don't have my hammer." And Odin says, "Are you the god of hammers or are you the god of thunder?" He said, "That was just to focus your power. That wasn't your power." And the same thing with the crystals. We're utilizing them to be able to augment our confidence and our power to be able to focus it, and ultimately be able to use these things as a technology the way the ancients did prior to the last two ice ages, and all the way down to the point of where we have what is called the Younger Dryas, which is a period of cold that happened between 12,800 years ago and 11,600 years ago, that plunged the Earth, because of a cataclysm, back into ice age temperatures and changed the environment to ultimately bring it to where we are now. So mushrooms have always played a role in us understanding technology, and for those who were the searchers to bring back things from the multiverse, from the omniverse, from the infraparticle realms, which are the realms that are very, very small in relationship to the very, very large, to glean these places for new and serving technologies, of which many we are just expressing into the human family right now. Things like teleportation, things like reanimators, things like gene manipulation. All of these things have basically come out of the relationship that we have with these psychedelic plants. Yesterday, the tragedy with in France with Notre Dame, many of the relics and different things that were there were saved, but the building itself, the architecture, the transdimensional way that this building was built is a magnificent legacy of the human mind and spirit. And people are saying, well, it's the Catholics, it's them getting one-upmanship for pedophilia and all that kind of stuff. That has nothing to do with the architecture. It has 3 mushrooms in the front of it, showing that where this came from. And the ancestors of that particular system who lived and made a relationship with the mushrooms And you know, it's I don't know how this thing happened.
That's okay.
Yeah,
No problem. No problem.
I did the thing with the yeah. I'm gonna turn it all the way off. But the relationship that the building itself had to entheogens is where I look at the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and I've been there like 6 times.
Mm.
So I know what I'm talking about through just going in and seeing the structure, how it relates to the sun rising, and how the doors show the mushroom glyph that is prevalent in all of these structures going back to the beginning of time that we have records of, because most of it is just basically centered in one faction of how we view history, we view the world, and things like that. No one is uh, in depth dealt with the antiquity of China, or the antiquity of Africa, or the antiquity of Australia, or the Indonesian archipelago. So people are now coming into the realization through being able to grow their own entheogens, being able to invoke DMT from different sources. You know, we're moving to a point to where we are understanding now that DMT is prevalent in nature, and being able to take that DMT out of nature and utilize it for consciousness enhancement is happening. It's in so many different grasses. Probably your lawn and your front lawn has DMT. Oranges have DMT. You know, so it goes on and on and on. But the mushroom is the older plant, the more pristine, because it deals with not just the earth, but those things that are out there, wherever out there is. You know, so these are things that I've been talking about, trying to convey.
Nice.
And many times when I'm doing that, you have a whole section of psychedelia, which is only focused on, you know, the medical and clinical utilizations of these very, very powerful fungi and plants that are here for us to learn and grow with. So, not that I'm opposed to those parts, but I just don't deal with that. We have enough people. We have every university on earth now, every um, PhD who's not finding fulfillment in their own field now switching to hallucinogens because this is the new thing. They can be invited to the wine and cheese parties. They can fly to Amsterdam and Prague and France and London and Munich and other places to be a superstar, where if they just stayed in their little bailiwick, you know, they'd just be stuck at the university and stuck home on the weekends. But so this is the thing that people are moving towards with the lessening and legalization of cannabis in many places around the U.S. You know, Detroit, where I stay, recreational cannabis is now legal.
Wow.
People can ride with so many ounces in their car. They can have so many plants in their basement, and on and on and on.
Such a huge shift, you know.
Yes, it's such a sacrifice for people who spent their lives and died in prison for just having a little bit of cannabis. To those people, I take my hat off to and salute, because it was just a tragedy from the beginning when the powers that be didn't want these things to be in the community because of their paternalistic type of views on what people should have and what people shouldn't. Now we're moving towards the legalization or decriminalization of psilocybin in places like Colorado and Iowa State and Washington State and California. Ultimately, all of these things will be decriminalized, legal to have, because they don't do any of the harm that narcotics do. You know, when you're charged with possessing narcotics, and the actual entity that you have isn't even a narcotic, but they just disregard because they don't, they're just going with what their fathers and mothers set in place. And so that's changing because, new people are coming and they're getting into legislature and things like that, and they can't go as someone in the 1960s. Well, I've never tried cannabis in my life, or I never had any LSD. It's destroying the youth. But now the people who are getting in are the people who were that youth who were supposedly so crazy for taking these terrible and horrible drugs. So mushrooms, again, are really where things are going to come down to, you know.
Yeah, I just read some news that some Chinese companies are starting to move into the space, of course, in the medical
Oh yeah.
sense, but it's amazing that that's happening in China, and in my mind, like psilocybin is just winning overall. They're just happy that people are talking about it, and no matter how they get into human beings, whether through the pharmaceuticals or the medical field, or people trying to make money from them, which I don't think they will allow, actually, the mushrooms. But yeah, mushrooms are just overjoyed with people talking about them all the time.
Most definitely. Well, they're medically they're moving towards a synthetic version of psilocybin for the medical uses because they have to have exact doses. They can't have the varying doses of psilocybin that are in supposedly natural mushrooms, because, each mushroom will vary in its psilocybin content. And when you want to give, so many micrograms or so many milligrams or so many ounces, you can't have the varying constituents inside. And then there are also cofactors inside of the natural mushrooms that make it that special thing that will be evacuated from, of course, the clinical or the so-called unnatural psilocybin that is synthesized in some certain way that they do, and they'll patent the process and all of that. But we're concerned with the mushrooms themselves and those things that are part of that, because the mushrooms are sentient. They have an experience, and you want that experience that's brung with the mushroom, because every person, every creature, every entity that has ever partaken of the mushroom, they add those experiences into the hard drive of this very, very sentient entity, the mushroom itself. And so you have the experiences of other creatures, and then you have experiences that are open and wide and ready to be filled into that same library of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you can give us a little idea about when you go on a mushroom journey, how do you prepare, and also what is your intention? What is in your mind when you're going into it?
Well, I mean, it's according. I prepare by just ultimately vacillating, going past the freezer where the mushrooms are, week after week, in contemplation of what I'm going to go through when I actually eat them. So I'll go by and say, okay, Saturday the 8th, I'm going to clear my day out for a mushroom excursion that night. And the 8th will come and I'll be looking at the refrigerator and say, no, not tonight. I'm going to wait till next week. I mean, I prepare for eating them. I have a little protocol myself for eating them. I don't do any elaborate ritualistic thing. It's the bed. I have my transdimensional cap that I wear. I have my pillow and my blanket, and it's in my bed in the darkness. That's basically it, because unless I'm going to do a structured crystal journey for some of the things that are specifically downloaded in the computer, which is the crystal, we like to look at them as room temperature quantum computers, room temperature handheld particle accelerators. So if I'm going to trip with the crystal at some point in the trip, I'll have on my nightstand, I'll have the crystal there for me to be able to pick it up and to be able to gaze into it, or to be able to hold it, to activate it. So that's if I'm doing a crystal trip. Regular trip is basically just eating them. I'm
And
a person who, in the eating them, I don't like the taste, I don't like the smell. On occasion, I do, vomit. Not always, and not, every time, but sometimes I do. And making it to the toilet, I'm good at making it to the toilet. I don't need a bucket anymore, so I'll make it to the toilet, and I'll kind of, if I throw up very early, I'll kind of look and see how much I've, gauged the ounces of what I threw up, rinse my mouth, things like that, and re-ingest the amount that I saw in the toilet. I re-ingest it.
wow.
So that's basically the protocol for that. I have a way of also chewing them, and chewing a lot of mushrooms is a difficult task. I
Mhm.
have a swimming pool nose plug, because if you can't smell them, you can't taste them.
Oh,
Once
interesting.
I'm through, and you have to get a good one. If not, it's going to keep slipping off your nose. But get a good one, like Olympic swimmers wear,
Mhm.
uh, to have that plugged off. And I drink a little bit of water with each mouthful, because they're dried mushrooms, to be able to maciate them better.
Mm.
After I'm finished, I rinse my mouth out, I brush my teeth, and then I have some ginger tea to kind of settle my stomach.
Wow.
But that's a good way of ingestion if you're going to ingest dried. Now,
Right.
there are all the different other protocols that people use. They put them in smoothies, on top of pizzas. They make tea. Um, Eat them along with Reese's butter peanut butter cups. All those different things. But the the preparation of actually chewing it and understanding that what this is going to do, I think is part of the process. It's the
Mm.
price you pay for getting in the amusement part.
Mhm.
So then I just wait for it to open up and reveal itself.
What
Now
and
I
and
can through
uh,
the force of contemplation and will, go to particular places that I have designated for particular things. I go and visit uh, the ancestors at a certain place. I go and uh, to my house on the other side, to be able to visit my wife and partner Kai Wingo, who passed, um, and other folks who are part of the family. Um, and then there's then there's adventure. I'll sit at the helm, and Scotty, the warp engines, are they ready? And yes, Captain, we're ready. And okay, Sulu, take us out. And then, where are we going? That away. And that's kind of like how it is for me.